Hey, what is going on, guys? It's DK. Back at you with another video here to bring the Thursday Night Showdown slate between the Cardinals and the Seahawks. Before I get into the video, if you guys are new to the channel, my name's DK. I make daily videos breaking down NBA, NFL, PGA, and esports, daily fantasy sports slates. Before we get into the video, I want to thank you guys again for the continued support. It is greatly appreciated. The easiest way to support me, since all the content is free, is to leave a like button on the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit the notification bell so you know when I upload videos, you know when I go live. I'll always, for the Showdown slates, be live streaming 30 minutes before lock, and the main slates 1 hour before lock on my YouTube channel, so make sure to check the live stream. I'll get to all your guys' questions. Also, if you guys cannot watch the YouTube videos, I do upload on Apple Podcasts. The link is in the description below. It's just the DK DFS show. But with that out of the way, let's jump into the video. So, finally, guys, we get a good showdown slate. We have suffered through Patriots, Jets. We have suffered through that Vikings-Bears game. It's been I want to say 4 or 5 straight, just really bad games on the island games, the showdowns. But finally, we get a good one, and I'm really excited about this. But yeah, before we talk about players and the prices of the slate, let's look back the lineup from Monday's showdown slate. And Monday did not go well for me. It did not go well for majority of people, I feel like. The Bears' passing offense was just completely dust. That game, was projected to be ugly. I mentioned, both defenses, were in consideration because they're cheap enough. We'll go over actually the winning lineup in the Millie Maker. Never a lineup. I don't think I would have got to that with 1,000 lineups. But we'll take a look at the winning lineup here in a sec. Yeah, so my lineup, I kind of told you guys where I was going, right? Mooney and the captain. It was just a disappointment. Chicago just could not. I forget what they finished with. Yeah, 106 yards passing. It's absolutely terrible in a really good matchup. The contrarian way ended up working out really well, which I mentioned in the live stream, right? That pivot off of, because we knew Dalvin Cook was going to be so popular, to go to Kirk Cousins in the passing attack, and that won it, right? It was Kirk Cousins, Jefferson, Thielen, right? So yeah, so really, again, anything can happen in these showdown slates, but there's a lot of variance involved in these, and I always say, don't go crazy with your entries in these showdowns. There's a lot of luck. Save those for the main slate. I don't go crazy for these. I play these a little bit more for fun. But yeah, the rest of my lineup, Dalvin Cook was okay, but again, for his price, it was kind of disappointing. Kirk Cousins was actually pretty solid. Knew out he was going to be lower owned. Foles was obviously a huge disappointment, almost 70% owned. Kyle Rudolph, mentioned him as my favorite value. He went for almost 10 fancy points, was pretty solid. I took a shot on Lamar Miller. He only played a few snaps. We did have a couple catches. Yeah, really just an ugly slate. But yeah, let's take a look at the winning lineup, because I do want to show you guys this is kind of crazy in the Millie Maker. So, like I said, I don't think I could have ever gotten to this lineup if I had 1,000 entries. But Justin Jefferson, the captain, with Kirk Cousins, Thielen, Cordell Patterson, and then both defenses. Both defenses were in the winning lineup. Crazy, he does the Minnesota passing attack, and then the Bears defense. It's crazy how that worked out, but it did. So yeah, that's really the look back of Monday's slate. Again, forgettable one for myself, but really excited to talk about Arizona and Seattle's Thursday night showdown slate. So let's take a look at the Vegas odds. And yeah, 57.5 over under. There's going to be a lot of points scored in this one. Seahawks are 3-point favorites. I mean, we saw what happened a couple weeks ago when these teams matched up, right? So let's take a look at snap counts here for each of these teams' last game, and then we can get into the player-by-player breakdown. So last game, it was pretty much an even 50-50 split with Drake coming back from injury. He played 52% of snaps. Chase Edmonds played 49% of snaps. But they did kind of mention that before lock, that it was going to be a pretty even split. Maybe this game they go a little bit more to Drake, but the downside with Ken and Drake obviously is just surprisingly there's just no involvement in the pass game this year. Edmonds is more the guy that's getting involved with the passing down work. Wide receivers for the Cardinals, DeAndre Hopkins is going to play majority of the game. He played 96% of snaps. Larry Fitzgerald, even though he's getting up there in age, he's still playing basically the entire game. He played 90% of snaps, and Christian Kirk played 74%. Andy Isabella, their number 4 receiver, played 15% of the snaps. Nothing really more than a dart throw. If you look at tight ends, Williams played 53% of snaps. Dan Arnold played 48%. Daniels played 19%. We do have Williams and Daniels questionable. If they're both out, then I think Dan Arnold does make for a pretty solid value play. Again, we'll get to that once we talk about the player-by-player breakdown. Seattle running backs, this is the mess. This is the headache. Kind of feels like the Bears running back situation on Monday. We don't know. We have Carson status up in the air. We have Hyde status up in the air. They're the number 1 and number 2 have been out for a little bit. We have Alex Collins, DJ Dallas, Travis Homer. So who knows what's going to happen. Last game, actually, Alex Collins did get the most touches. He played 48% of snaps. Dallas played 33% of snaps, and Travis Homer played 10%. Again, we might have Carson and Hyde back in this one too, so could get ugly. I'll try to do my best to break it down, but right now it's kind of a situation I want to stay away from. Wide receivers for the Seahawks. We know Metcalf and Lockett are going to play a majority of the game. Now, Lockett actually was is on the injury report. His status is questionable. Something to keep an eye on. If he ends up surprisingly getting ruled out, then guys like David Moore and Swain look like 2 of the top value plays of the slate. And they're using, 3 and 4 wide receivers. So that's a lot more here for Seattle. Last game, David Moore, 61% of snaps. Freddie Swain, 37% of snaps. And finally, tight end for Seattle. Greg Olsen played 72% of snaps last game. Will Dissly, 36%. Hollister, 9%. But Seattle and their tight ends is kind of, if you go like week by week, it's just so up and down, right? Like Olsen played 72% of snaps last game. 2 games ago, 40%. It was Hollister that played more, 48%. He played 9% last game. And you can just go like week by week. Like it's kind of hard to trust what they're going to do. Dissly played the most in week 8, right? So who knows really what they're going to go to with their tight ends and who's going to play more. So all are in play, all 3, but they're just risky because, it's like they're trading off who is playing more in every single game. All right, let's start at the top, and you guys know I'm playing Kyler Murray. Like, there's no way I'm fading him. Again, played him basically every single week so far on the main slate, and when he's on the showdown slate, I'm not fading him on this one. The floor is so high. Again, rushing ability 74, 67, 106, and 61 yards in the ground. The matchup is amazing here. He's just been super, super productive. He's had 5 rushing touchdowns the last 4 games. Again, that really just raises his floor and his upside. Love Kyler Murray. Even at $13K, I think he's a priority for this slate. Like, I don't think you fade Kyler Murray. Play him and don't get, and move on. Russell Wilson, kind of the same thing. 11.8K. You do get a nice little discount off of Kyler Murray, but I'm playing both quarterbacks. I am. I'm going to find a way to jam him in, and I'll get value elsewhere. The upside on both these guys is just enormous. I know Russell Wilson had a bad game last game against the Rams. I'm not worried about it at all. Not at all. This is, against Arizona, 3 or 4 weeks ago, he put up 35 fantasy points. And he's still a guy that can get rushing upside, right? He had 84 yards in the ground against Arizona, 60 in the game against the Rams. Not as much as Kyler Murray, but definitely still has that floor. So, yeah, I love both quarterbacks. Again, that's not a contrarian take. Both are going to be very, very popular. But I will be playing both and getting value elsewhere. So let's talk about the wide receivers. Hopkins at 10-8. He's really good at football. It was an insane catch last game there against Buffalo on the Hail Mary. He's been, if you look at the last 4 games, I guess a little bit up and down, but I'm not overly concerned about it, right? 9, 28, 6, and 28 fantasy points. The game against Dallas, they just didn't really need to pass. The game against Miami, they had I think 3 or 4 pass interference calls against the defense. So on Hopkins when he was trying to go for the catch. So yeah, I'm not really concerned about those down games from Hopkins. He has a really big upside, like 30-plus fantasy point upside. We saw what he did a few weeks ago against Seattle, put up almost 30 fantasy points. So love his upside if you can get to him. But like I said, you're going to have to make some tough calls in the slate. If you play both quarterbacks and one of these top receivers, let's say we throw DeAndre Hopkins in there, going to be tricky, right? If you throw one of those guys in the captain, it's going to be kind of hard. But I think there's enough viable value options we'll talk about where I think you can make it work by playing both quarterbacks and one of the top receivers. That's probably the strategy I'm leaning towards right now. But yeah, let's talk about the other receivers here. So Metcalf and Lockett. Metcalf's at 10-2. With these Seattle receivers, it feels like it's so hard to predict which one's going to have a good game. They're very up and down. Like Lockett, if you look at his last 5 games, Metcalf, I should say, 27, 4, 43, 26, and 4 fantasy points. So, yeah, very up and down. Lockett, kind of the same thing, right? Last 4 games, 56 against Arizona, right? He had 20 targets, 15 catches. I'm not expecting that again. 7, 8, 11 fantasy points, right? He's at a 40 in here, a 56. So they're very up and down, but they're the clear top targets, obviously, here for Russell Wilson. And, Seattle's has been forced to pass it a ton this year. So I like both Seattle receivers. Again, if you can get to them, you're going to have to make a tough call if you're playing both quarterbacks and which one of these top receivers, if you even want to get to one of these top guys. So, yeah, again, I wish I had a stronger take here on Metcalf versus Lockett, but I don't, right? They're up and down. Again, Lockett had the big game last game against Arizona, so he'll probably be more popular if he plays. Got to keep an eye on the injury news, though. If he surprisingly gets ruled out, then like I said, I really like David Moore. I really like Swain for value. Like, those would be the 2 top value plays in the slate, in my opinion, if Lockett is out. Lockett plays, again, it's very boomer bust, but we've seen the upside from him. So the top receivers all look good, but you're going to have to make a tough call on which one you're going to prioritize there with Hopkins and the 2 top guys there for Seattle. Running backs at Chris Carson, 8-4, is just a fade, even if he plays for me. Was a limited participant on Tuesday. It's just too pricey, right? And who knows if he's going to get a full workload. If we get news that Carson's good to go, full workload's going to be the bell cow back, sure, I guess you can consider him, but he's just, I don't want to go to these Seattle running backs in the slate. I just much prefer the upside in the wide receivers. Christian Kirk's at 7-4, so he's kind of at a tricky price point. I don't think, the mid-range in the showdown sites a lot of the times, unless someone like really stands out, kind of goes forgotten about. Most of the times it's kind of a stars and scrubs build. Kirk at 7-4 in the mid-range, I think will be pretty low owned, because I think what most people will do is play both quarterbacks and probably try to jam in one of those top receivers. And if you do that, it's going to be near impossible to get Christian Kirk in your lineup. But we've seen upside game from Kirk. 3 of the last 4 games, over 20 fantasy points. He's got the big play upside. Sure, he kind of had a dud last game against Buffalo. Not overly concerned about it, right? Because he can be kind of boom or bust, right? He's going to run the deep routes. I think he's a perfectly fine play in the mid-range. I think more of a contrarian play. I don't think a ton of people get him. Kenny Drake's at 6-2. It's tough because I think he does get a little bit more work, right? It was basically even 50-50 split, but he's really kind of touchdown dependent right now with no involvement in the passing game. Like, if he doesn't score, kind of going to be hard for him to get value unless he just breaks this, it goes for like 150 yards in the ground. So I think Drake is an interesting play. Again, I think the running games for both teams are risky, and they're going to be lower owned. But his first game back from injury, he had 100 yards, so he looked good. It's just, like I said, there is no real involvement in the passing game. Makes him a riskier play. Now, I'm not saying he's out of play. I could definitely see a way where Drake gets you there. But I think he either needs a touchdown or he needs like 100+ yards on the ground. And he has had over 100 yards in 2 last 4 games. So, and again, the matchup is really good. Like, Seattle has struggled defensively to stop anyone. So I think Drake is an interesting play in the mid-range, but not someone I'm really prioritizing. Kind of same with Chase Edmonds, right? I think the snaps go down on him a bit, but he's still like productive with his touches. Like, he'll probably get, 5 to 10 carries on the ground and then like 4 or 5 targets. Like, he's going to be targeted more, but won't get as many carries. So both running backs are, yes, they're in play for Arizona, but I don't know if one really stands out. If you land on those guys, that's fine. But like I said, I think the guys that I'm prioritizing, obviously, are both quarterbacks. I'm probably going to try to jam in one of those top receivers. I think that's the way to go for like the big upside, right? At Carlos Hyde's at 5-2, we'll see, right? We have Carson's status up in the air. We have Hyde's status up in the air. If Carson is out and Hyde plays and he's full go and he's going to be their bell cow back, then sure, you can look to Carlos Hyde. But I don't think that's going to be the case with Collins there, with Homer there, with Dallas there. Right? It's not a situation I really want to mess with the Seattle running backs. But again, we'll monitor that. We'll talk about it more in the live stream once we get actives and inactives. David Moore's at 4-8. I think he's a pretty decent value play. He's not really going to blow the roof off the slate, but he's probably will get around 50% of the snaps. Right? He played over 60% that last game. Again, partly I think due to the fact that they were trailing. Right? He played 61% of the snaps. I think that was a season high for him. So, yeah, David Moore's definitely in play here at 4-8. Last 3 games, 3, 3, 6, and 3 targets, right? And I think he's a fine option at 4-8. Definitely someone you can consider. There is a good amount of value on the slate. I don't know if one play really stands out, but there's definitely about, I would say 6 or so value guys that are viable on the slate. Larry Fitzgerald, another one of those guys. Sure, he's not going to blow the roof of the slate either, but he is going to play a majority of the game. 8, 5, and 5 targets. I think he's a safer value. Probably, I would say probably the safest value option just because of his playing time, right? He played, what, 90% of the snaps? Sure, again, he doesn't have as much upside with his age now, but he's still, again, he's out there majority of the game. He's still getting targeted a decent amount out of the slot. So, yeah, I think Larry Fitzgerald is a pretty safe value option, definitely someone I'm considering. Both kickers are viable too, right? This is a slate, we have almost 58 over-under, so there's going to be a lot of points scored. You can definitely look to both kickers. Like, kickers are always safe value on these showdown slates. We've seen showdown slates where kickers have been in the winning lineup. We saw one showdown slate where the kicker was in the captain. Right? It's definitely possible. So both kickers are 100% in play for me with an over-under this high. Again, there's going to be a lot of points scored, so I like both kickers for value. Collins at 3.8, we'll see. He did get the most snaps that last game, but that was with Hyde and Carson out. Both their statuses are up in the air. If they're both out, can you look to Collins at 3.8? Sure. But like I said, they would still use Dallas. They would still use Homer. So it's just the Seattle running backs, it's hard to get really excited about. Now, Greg Olsen's at 3.6. I think he is a pretty decent value option. If you just look at the snaps last game, right, he played 72% of the snaps, but we went over it, right? Every single week, it seems to be like it's Olsen, and then it's Hollister, and then it's Dissly playing more. So can we trust that Olsen's going to play a majority of the snaps? I don't think we can necessarily trust it if we go and look at the recent weeks. But he's someone that is definitely viable, right? 3, 4, 3, and 4. Targets in the last 4 games. So playable, like for me, I feel a little bit more comfortable getting to guys like Fitzgerald or, probably David Moore. But Olsen is definitely a value guy I think you can look to. The defenses at 3-2 and 2-8 are just not going to go there. What you need is you need a defensive score because, again, most likely this game is going to be a shootout. With it getting close to 60 in the over-under, I just don't really want to consider the defense. There's still a way the defense gets you there, but you need probably like a punt return for a touchdown, or you need a defensive score. So I'm really not going to prioritize the defenses in this one. Dan Arnold at 2-2. Again, we have Williams' status up in the air, as well as Williams and Daniels. So if they're both out, Dan Arnold, I think, would be a pretty solid value play. He had 4 catches and 4 targets last game. If there's no competition for snaps, and he's going to play majority of the game, then yeah, he is someone that we could look to. Again, got to keep an eye on Williams' status as well as Daniels. Williams did not practice last game, so we'll see. Right, this is something to monitor. We'll talk about it more in the live stream, obviously. Andy Isabella, he's their number 4 receiver for Arizona. He played last game. He played 15% of snaps. Right, he's not going to play a ton. Can you throw him in the player pool? Yeah, like he's had a catch in the last 3 games, but he's really not going to be out there a ton. You need him to, and his 1 or 2 catches to really break one. So sure, it's not out of the realm possibility that he's in the winning lineup, but he's definitely a riskier value option. Dissly, we talked about the Seattle tight ends, right? It's hard to trust who's going to get the majority of the work. 4, 1, 1, and 2 targets. I think he's a slightly riskier option, but he still had a catch in the last 4 games. Again, playable, but not overly excited about it. Freddie Swain's at 1-2. I actually think he's an okay value. And again, if we get the news that Lockett is out, then I love David Moore. I love Freddie Swain. So they would step into the number 2 and number 3 roles and would just be underpriced. So last game, Freddie Swain played 37% of the snaps. And the game before, he was in the 30% range too. So at 1-2, that's playable. Again, I obviously feel more comfortable getting up a little bit more to guys like Fitzgerald and David Moore, but Freddie Swain is someone you can look to. At this price, he doesn't need a lot to pay off his salary, and it allows you to get those studs into your lineup if you go to one of these like really cheap guys. Hollister, the same thing I'll say about Olsen, same thing I'll say about Dissly, right? Hard to trust. He barely played the last game, and the game before, he played the majority of the snaps, or 2 games before, right? So Seattle and their tight ends, it's hard to get a read on who is going to get the majority of the work. All 3 tight ends are in play, but hard to feel really comfortable at any of them. Homer's at $800. He's limited to, and he's more their passing down running back. If both Hyde and Carson are out, then I think you could at least consider Homer. He's not going to play a ton, but he'll be out there for some of the third down work. Again, didn't play a ton, but I guess we'll be at least in consideration. Kind of same with DJ Dallas, right? Only would consider him if both Carson and Hyde are out. And Daniels, he's the third string tight end. If both him and Max Williams are out, then I think Dan Arnold looks like a pretty decent value play. And I think that really wraps it up for the player-by-player breakdown. Yeah, that's really it. So let's talk about cash games, guys. If you're playing cash games, where would I go in the slate? Well, you're looking at it, right? You play both quarterbacks, and I think you play one in the captain. I think, I feel a little bit more comfortable with Kyler Murray in the captain, so that's probably where I start my lineup. Then, yeah, you only have 4.6K remaining, but there's enough value you can make it work. Again, if you go one of these top receivers, might be a little bit tricky, but it still would be viable, 2.8K. We've talked about some cheaper guys, so that's probably where I go for cash games, right? Both quarterbacks and probably one of those top receivers. Just because the running backs, it's hard to trust, right? Normally, I would try to get for cash games both quarterbacks and probably one of the bell cow backs, but how can you trust either team in the running backs, right? Seattle could be 5 running backs in play. Arizona, you have Drake, who is their starting back, but has no involvement in the pass game, makes him touchdown dependent. You have Edmonds, whose snaps will go down, but it's right. So it's hard to feel really comfortable at any of the running backs. And then, like I said, my build is probably going to be both quarterbacks and one of these top receivers, and then value from there. We mentioned a lot of value plays. We'll go over them again, right? David Moore, Larry Fitzgerald. I like both kickers in a game that's going to be super high or super high scoring. I think Dan Arnold, if both those tight ends are out. The Seattle tight ends are all in play, but hard to get a good read on who's going to be the main guy there. I think Freddie Swain, the number 4 receiver for Seattle, looks okay. Again, if Lockett does get ruled out, it's David Moore, it's Freddie Swain as the 2 top value plays in the slate for me. Dallas and Homer guys we could look to, but that's dependent on the status of Carson and Hyde. If they're both out, then yeah, I think you could look to Homer Dallas for value. And yeah, that really wraps it up for me. Again, for GPPs, about 75% of the time, the winning lineup has either a running back or wide receiver. But this is a unique situation where we have both quarterbacks have rushing upside. Again, we've seen Kyler Murray have 5 rushing touchdowns the last 4 games. So I like getting to the quarterbacks and the captains. I don't think you have to do it. But I think that's definitely the safe way to go. And I would not be surprised at all if either quarterback is in the winning optimal lineup at captain. But yeah, I think that's going to do it for the video today, guys. So if you have been enjoying the content so far, I'd really appreciate it if you leave a like button on the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit the notification bell so you know when I upload videos, you know when I go live. I'm going to try to aim for 100+ likes on this video, guys. So yeah, make sure to hit that like button. Again, check out the live stream as well, 30 minutes before lock. Super excited about this slate. I will answer all your guys' questions, so very important to check out the live stream, and we'll talk about some builds, some contrarian plays, what I'm thinking, and obviously we'll talk about the injuries as well. So thanks again, guys. Hope you guys have a good day, and I will see you all Thursday in the live stream.